Okay, so we just started recording our meeting. So I'm here, Abby's here. How are y'all doing?
We're good.
Hi,
Hi.
Abby. Wally here.
Hey,
Sulma here. Hey.
hey. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen so that we can get started with our presentations.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, your your engagement pictures. That's it.
Yes. Okay. All right. Here's our first one. Slideshow. Okay.
Okay. And then I have to move it, right? To do it like.
I can move it for you.
Okay. And how do you know? Okay. Okay. This is good evening. My name is Sulma Vargas, and I consider myself like an ESL student. So please, I'm asking you to be patient, and this is my first presentation in English, so I'm excited. Okay, go ahead. Okay, the topic of discussion is about implicit and explicit learning, dual mode system, and social cultural SLA. And okay, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Implicit and explicit learning, I have it right here. Implicit learning is the learning that we had been exposed. Can you move this a little bit to the left?
Yeah.
So it says that it's like a stimulant environment and takes place like naturally, and it's like just exposing ourselves in a specific environment without any intention to learn. Okay, like we can learn like when the kids play the playground. Okay, it could be one of those examples. And for the okay, and the explicit learning gives you explicit knowledge that facilitates explicit learning and development and implicit knowledge system. I'm sorry, wait, I will get it again. I'm sorry. Explicit learning is the learning that is consciously made by a person with an effort, okay, like trying to learn or knowledge or a new language. Okay, go ahead, go on. Next, okay, dual mode system. I think I pronounced this like a scan 1998. Okay, he talked about rule-based and example-based, and I have a good example here. This system consists of explicit rule-based information and implicit example-based information. This is conscious system that may activate depending on which system is more convenient to use at a given moment. Okay, for example, when an LA learn is trying to communicate fast, he or she will relate on their implicit learning to form their sentence since it is easier to access, whereas they will be used to explicit learning whenever they need to express themselves or express complex ideas that require a broad knowledge of the language. I got here also that it's kind of like learning through explicit teaching and effort. The next one, oh, I'm sorry, the dual, I'm sorry, go back.
You're good.
Okay, I think I got, did I say the right thing? I'm sorry. Okay, yes. Okay, the dual mode system goes hand to hand with explicit and implicit learning. Rule-based relate explicit learning through intentional delivery and practice. Example basis relate to implicit learning through observing and doing based on hearing and seeing others. Next one, please. I got confused something here. Okay, now the social cultural SLA is by Vygotsky, 1986. Okay. He believed that the learning appears when, for example, a teacher meets a student where they can learn and move to the what he called it like zone of proximal development. The zone of proximal development provides an entry point in which the teacher begins by providing access to core or content on a level in which the student is comfortable. This takes the student cans and allows the scaffolding model to attain their cannot. The teacher is then able to gradually release independence to the student in accomplished task. Thank you.
That's it.
Yes, that's it.
So those
Great.
are your three. Abby, if you don't mind, I'll go next.
Okay. Perfect. Do you want me to do yours too, just like this?
I got it. I
Okay.
think I got it.
I'll stop sharing. Hold
Okay. I want to try.
on. Okay, you're good.
It says disable share. Host attendee screen sharing.
I stopped sharing my screen.
Okay, let's try again. It say that you have that. Okay, you go ahead,
Okay,
Abby.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's not letting me.
I fixed it. Go ahead. Try it again.
You think so? Okay,
Mhm.
let's try. Is it working? Are you late? Is
I
it
don't see
showing?
anything yet.
Okay. That's why. Entire screen. There you go. Okay. Let's see.
Oh, it works.
Yes, you got it. You got the mute. She got the mute.
Oh, you're muted.
Wally.
Oh no.
No. Yes, go ahead.
Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start again. Here we go again. Are we there, Ned?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we are together to do a presentation for the of first digital tool in base of the book Understanding Second Language Acquisition from Ellis Roth, and it's the chapter 1, Second Language Acquisition Research Overview. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay, so my first concept was what is called comprehensive output and output hypothesis, and it was presented by Swain in 1985. This one is telling you that, or telling us that learners not only need an input, but they also need an environment to produce an output as well. To me, is because they need to produce what is called a push out output, because comprehension can happen in any way, because they can figure it out, context clues, all that kind of things. They need to really get engaged. An example of that is when a teacher explains a concept and the students check each other's understanding over it, of the understanding of this concept in a small group where native speakers are to be included. The second, the second concept that I consider important was dual mode system, like Sun already explained it from Skihan, who presented in 1998, and it's the one that it tells us that the learners have two ways or two systems to process information. And besides that, they're going to come out with a response on a rule-based analytics system when they are in a formal setting, while they will be using a rapid communication. And when they have to have a rapid communication in those kind of situations, they will be using their exemplar-based system. Examples of these kind of situations is when the learner is texting. When they're texting, they pay little to no attention to their grammar or spelling. While if they are having to submit a paper or do a class presentation, they will have to be more careful and be aware of their mistakes. The third concept that I consider important was a mixture of an acculturation model that was presented by Schumann in 1978, and then a mix with the social interaction by Firth and Wagner in 1997. Acculturation says that the student hold on a second, my notes. An acculturation was presented by Schumann in 1978, when he said that the social distance between the language that we're learning and the student and the community of the language that we're learning is what is going to influence the acculturation, or the I would say the assimilation of the student in the new language that he's learning. The more interaction that a student or a learner has in an environment that's rich on the L2 that he's learning, the more acculturation is going to be. And therefore, the student is going to be more exposed to the L2. Therefore, social interaction plays a very important part for acculturation to happen. That's why I have put those two hand to hand. An example of this model is an inclusion class or an inclusion environment, where the student is not all surrounded by their L1 community or the L1 students that speak the same language or native language as they are, but where native language or native speakers of the language targeted are in the same classroom, because in that way the student is forced to put in practice the language that they're learning. I know we were talking about examples of the classroom, but also an example is in the community. When a person is located in a community where they don't have social interaction with people that do not speak the same native language that they have, where they don't see the need to learn the new language, they are surrounded in a bubble. So they don't see the need, and there is no the motivation or the reasoning why to learn a language. That's why I consider social interaction and acculturation go hand to hand. And that was it for me.
That was so good. That was great.
Go ahead, Abby. Show us how this is done.
Okay.
Take your time. Take your time. You have 15 minutes.
Okay. Can you stop sharing your screen?
Okay. Hold on. You see, I'm learning. I told you.
There you go. Okay. I'm going to share mine again.
Okay.
Okay.
We still have 15 minutes of the first 13.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Go ahead, Abby. Show
I
us.
talk a lot. So
It doesn't surprise me. That's what I say. Show us. Come on. Tulma, let's start screenshotting and seeing how we need to do this kind of stuff.
Let's learn from her. That's okay.
Okay, hold on. I got my notebook.
okay, let me see. Okay. All right. So today, I'm going to present on our PLC digital tool practice PLC for chapter 1, where we dive into a little bit of what the main principles of second language acquisition are, and kind of all the different basis researchers and foundational theories that have really laid the basis for what this field of study is. And I'm really excited to talk about it with y'all today, and all of the different aspects that are included in second language acquisition because it does encompass so much more than just one field of science with all different kinds of data. It's also bringing in emotional aspects and social aspects as well. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I chose is the interaction hypothesis, and this is one of the earlier studies of research that Michael Long does. He did it in 1983, and this hypothesis states that a second language is developed by a learner spending time having face-to-face interaction with native speakers. Now, I don't want anyone to be confused that the interaction hypothesis is not saying that the learner is learning through the interaction. It's saying that the learner is collecting data from this interaction that is being stored in their brain, where they are storing all this information to develop their second language. And it kind of goes a little bit hand in hand. I've put right here the negotiation of meaning became popular rather than Krashen's comprehensible input hypothesis. The comprehensible input hypothesis actually states that if one person that's learning in L2 is receiving comprehensible input, which means things they can understand, that they are just going to automatically pick up a second language. And I know that we all know that now that that's not to be true, that there are very many other aspects that we're going to get into later in my presentation that go into learning a second language. But this was really the beginning, and it was just like breaking the surface of the iceberg of saying, oh, well, wait, like there's a negotiation of meaning that's going on rather than just this person receiving all of this data in their brain for a second language. They are processing it through social interaction. So this negotiation of meaning begins where through this interaction, they're picking up this data, and then later they're processing it and thinking about that interaction that they've had in their head. So a classroom example that I thought was really great that I've seen done at my old university and that I see done in the classroom every single day is conversation partners. And I think this is very essential to the second language learner's process of learner, because it consists of a native speaker partnering with a language learner so that the language learner can receive comprehensible input and produce comprehensible output. It's kind of like, okay, like let's test this experiment for the language learner. I'm going to go and put myself in this conversation, and then let's see if I can produce comprehensible output with the native speaker. And so that way they're negotiating that meaning in their mind during this interaction that they're having, so that they are able to make the connections between their L1 and their L2 through this interaction hypothesis and develop that interlanguage skill at the same time. I really believe the interaction is necessary for the development of the interlanguage, which the learner uses then to develop their L2. Okay. The next one that I want to talk about is positive and negative transfer. And as a second language learner myself, I've seen this play such a huge role in my second language learning because, like the book said, it's one of those things where you think that you're just going to translate, oh, like this sentence in my first language is going to just be equal to these other words, but it's actually completely different than that. There's so many more aspects, such as verb and noun agreement, feminine and masculine agreement, plural agreement. The word order changes sometimes. And so that's a whole new thing that we as second language learners have to learn. And so the idea behind positive and negative transfer that was developed by Selinker in 1972 is that positive transfer is the concept in which there is a similarity between your L1 and your L2. So for example, cognates. A lot of teachers will use cognates in the L1 and the L2. As an ESL teacher, I see this a lot in my classroom, that I will point to a word that sounds like another word in Spanish, and I'll say, okay, here's this, and here's this word in English, and they'll repeat it to me. And so then they can kind of make the connection. Well, like, oh, they're similar. So that's a positive transfer. And that means that it's easier for learners to process this in their mind because it is something that they already have previous knowledge of, that they can kind of take from their L1 and it transfers easily into their L2. A negative transfer, on the other hand, is something that states that the L1 is different from the L2. In this subject matter, it differs. One for me that is very confusing is direct objects in Spanish. That's an example for me. So in English, I would say, I see it, but you can say it see sometimes in Spanish, and that confuses me. So a lot of times I will avoid using direct objects or things of that nature because I don't know where to put it in my speech, and I get confused. And also different past tenses too, in different languages. But one of the most common ones that you'll see that the book talks about is whether you're learning, let's say, Spanish and English is your L2, that might be easier. There might be a lot more positive transfer than Chinese and English. So if you're learning Chinese and then you're a Chinese speaker and you're learning English, there would not be as much positive transfer because Spanish and English share an alphabet, as where Chinese and English don't share an alphabet at all. And so it's harder for the learner to process the new information. So Kellerman actually capitalized on this idea, and he says, now you see it, now you don't, and kind of comes up with 3 main ways that instead of focusing and saying positive and negative transfer is the reason for everything going wrong in language learning, and it's the main reason that we have such a hard time, this was kind of the shift as in saying, yeah, positive and negative transfer exist in second language acquisition, but it only shows up as one of the main, like maybe 5 ways that we have interference in our language learning. And this is what Kellerman said. He said language distance, which is what I just spoke about the distance between Spanish and English is a lot shorter than the distance between Chinese and English. That's language distance. Avoidance, which I also spoke about, of how I would avoid something in my second language that is different from my first language. So it might sound different or it might look different grammar wise, and I might avoid that. And then conceptual transfer. And this one is very interesting to me because sometimes we have concepts in our culture of our first language that we grew up in that might be different from another culture. And so some word that has a lot of symbolism in one culture and a lot of different connotations in that L1 language might have a completely different connotation in the L2 language. And so we see that conceptual transfer of maybe, oh, like this means something bad in my L1, so it must mean something bad in my L2 as well. And that's that transfer of knowledge, and that we might have to correct as we go along teaching our second language learners and kind of show them the pragmatics of our language. And then just my classroom example, I would refer to again as the cognates that we would use a lot in our class, saying that this word is similar to this word. So red and rojo, they both start with an R, kind of sounds similar. So that's what I would say is a positive transfer. Okay. And my last one is the social identity theory is what I chose. It was done by Norton in 2000. This kind of goes along with sociocultural SLA and social interaction. I just picked this certain theory because it proposes that there are 3 main social aspects of a language learning that affect a person's ability to acquire a second language. And this is like on the emotional side, where the emotional and social field intersects with the study of second language acquisition. And those 3 aspects are power, identity, and language learning. And so for me, this really struck me because I do see this in my students. My classroom example was that in my classroom, social identity plays a major role. For example, I have 5 students who don't speak English. And since they go throughout their classes all day together and they have each other to depend on, and they have people that speak Spanish surrounding them, they don't feel the need to learn English because they're having all of these accommodations that are given to them in Spanish. And so their identity that they see themselves as right now is they still see themselves as Spanish speakers, mainly Spanish speakers. Their identity hasn't developed into what that looks like in the United States for them, and it hasn't broadened into what is my second language. Power is another one. I thought this one was very interesting because the book speaks on the right to speak, and I thought this was an incredible idea because I've felt this before, like being in a different country. I felt like, oh my goodness, like, am I good enough to speak these people's native language to them? Like, do I have like the power, if that is the right word, to say that? And it says if a person feels recognized as a legitimate co-communicator, they will feel as if they are respected by the native speaker. And in turn, this motivates or gives them the motives to learn the L2. Whereas if someone has the attitude of, I'm never going to be good enough, they're going to laugh at me if I speak at them, I'm going to say this word wrong, and just constantly has that effective filter in our brains that is just telling us all of these things that we're not going to be able to do right, their identity in their power or right to speak is going to look a lot different than someone who is confident in their abilities, who is motivated to learn. And then the last aspect is language learning, which is the zone of proximal development, which we've already talked about in our other presentations. But the zone of proximal development basically means that a language learner and a native speaker have created a level in which self-regulation is used to educate the learner. This is meaning that they've reached this level where it's not too hard for the language learner to understand, but also not too easy. It's created this level where they feel challenged, but they also feel comfortable with the material that they are receiving from the native speaker and the input that they're receiving. So these are my 3 topics: social identity theory, positive and negative transfer, and the interaction hypothesis. And I just want to thank you all for listening.
That was great.
Okie dokie. So we have about 8 minutes left. So Abby, Suma, we all 3, I think we pretty much all agree with that social interaction was one of the main factors,
Yes.
or one of the most important factors, because in one way or another, all of us touched that one, being part that in order for the language acquisition to happen and happen fast and happen with proficiency and all that, students need to be having that interaction. If not, they're going to stay in a bubble like you're seeing it now with your students, where they don't see the need because they are surrounded by Spanish speak. And we have seen that in communities like people who live in Hoover, or people who live in California, where they have their own Spanish communities and they do everything in that Spanish community, so they don't see the need. So the concept of social interaction, do we all agree to be one of the most important ones?
Yes.
Zulmita?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Being part of the interaction, Abby, what the second one I think we say was just plain interaction, right?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
the interaction
Yes.
hypothesis. It was I think that one is also one of the most important ones, because although it takes the social out of it, it's still that interaction. It's still that person to person. Here's what we're going through. Here's like the language that I'm trying to learn, and I'm getting real life samples of what's going on. So even though we might not be including the social part in that, we're still having that face-to-face interaction where that learner has to negotiate the meaning of the words and try to process it in real time, because we all know that out of the 4 skills, writing, reading, listening, and speaking, it's so much easier just to read and to write than it is to speak and to listen, because that requires you to have comprehensive abilities in real time, and that's what interaction does for us. So I think that one is probably the second most important one.
Yes.
And I think we all have agreed that the third one was going to be the
dual mode system.
Yes, and you talked about that one, Suma.
And I did talk about that one. It's like rule-based and example-based. Like rule-based is like it's related. They go hand to hand with the dual mode system, go hand to hand with explicit and implicit learning. The rule-based is related, like it's intentional delivery and practice, like learning through intentional delivery and practice. An example is basically related to implicit learning through when you see somebody, when you tried not to imitate, but just like, I have a little boy that if I go walking with him and I will say like, hey girl, he will say like, hey girl, he will just follow, and he knows that that is a way like to say hello, like he's learning like around the thing.
Mhm.
So they stood together, they have the two systems generate like input and output for an SLA.
Yeah.
If you want to add something else, it's good.
I mean, I see it like there are two ways that the student are going to find two ways. One that is that formal setting that you have to process all the information, take some time, understand and all that. Or like I say, when you're texting, you're pretty much not thinking about it. You just answer and you just want to get the idea by not paying attention if you're spelling it correctly, if you're grammatically correct, you're just sending it out and just getting the idea out.
Mhm.
That's the
what-
way I see.
That's why I also see like it's so important to educate students in a dual mode system, because if they do just like acquire their second language through social interaction, they could continue to use the wrong grammar throughout the whole rest of their life, because there will be fossilization of those skills. So what they might be doing in a pragmatic setting where they're just hanging out with their friends and just getting to know each other versus writing an essay, that's two different kinds of speaking and almost two different languages within and of
Completely.
itself.
Yes,
And then
that's right.
and I don't know, Sulma, but that's one of the challenges that I, as a student, are confronting right
Me
now.
too. I was going to say
Because
that.
we feel very comfortable carrying on a conversation, but when you sit down and have to write an essay,
No way. I cannot find the
panic.
words. Yes.
I panic.
I will
I
write
can't.
that like at first grade level, something like that. Yes. That's me. That's me. And you think, and I thought that I have like enough English, but it's not. I mean, I don't know no grammar rules or anything like that. I would just say it and that's it.
And you see, now going back to the 5 factors, that's part of or acculturization. We've been surrounded by this environment. We have learned to speak it, but we haven't gone that far, or we're working on that far. We
Mhm.
having how would you say that word, Abby? Acculturized? What would we say?
Acculturized.
Acculturized. Thank
Right.
you. You see, we know enough to be talking and be carrying because we've been surrounded. So because it's part of the social interaction, the interaction, all that stuff, but we haven't really gone that deep, and that's why you're gonna see us sometimes looking at you like, what you saying?
It's okay.
So going back, go ahead, Abby.
Yeah, I would do the same thing in Spanish. That's exactly how I feel. Like I can carry on a conversation, but if you asked me to write an essay, even though I studied it in college, I would still feel like, oh my goodness, like what
Don't
does
know how to do it.
it
Yes.
sound like?
So going back to the 5 concepts, we already discussed social interaction. We discussed interaction, dual mode system. So sort of kind of we touch and agree that acculturization model is one concept that is also important. And Abby, yours, close it out because that was your main one, positive and negative transfer.
Yeah, positive and negative transfer. I think that one is also, we can't leave that out because I mean, it is for me, and especially for the like whenever you're picking up your second language, you're relying on that first one. Like that positive and negative transfer, you're translating in your head all the time and you're thinking, "Oh, like, what am I going to say back? Oh, like I can do this. Oh, what is I? Oh, like yo,
Don't
puedo."
even try spelling.
Yes.
Spelling kills me.
Oh girl,
Kills.
you have to see what I did. I had to go to Google Translate and do the whole thing in Spanish. Like I had to read it in Spanish. Okay, this is what I mean. For real, girl, I'm not lying. Yes, I have all the things here. Look.
Listen.
Okay, see it. Look. I'm gonna show it to you. I mean, this is real. This is real life. Las cuentas socioculturales de la adquisición del E2 había existido durante algún tiempo, pero tuvieron poco impacto, and I was getting it in Spanish. It's like you always like, that's the thing. you always try to translate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it happening to me. Like, it's kind of
Okay.
confused. So I had to read it in Spanish so I can go, okay, this is what they mean. And still don't get in it. I had to read it like 1,000 times.
Let me just share one moment and we will close this because I know you have only 2 minutes left. The moment that I felt more accomplished in my life was when I have a surgery and I was under anesthesia and I was waking up and I was always afraid that I was gonna wake up and in the surgery room or in the room when they were transferring with nobody around me that speaks Spanish. I will start just speaking Spanish. No, baby, I woke up speaking English to everybody. Even
like, very good. Like,
my husband was like, Mija, you speaking English everywhere? Like, yes. And I was wondering, where were you? You were supposed to be with me all the time.
yes.
So he's like, okay, we are in a different level. So anyhow, that, I mean, you see, you have your own experience, Abby. We have our experience through this whole process.
Yeah, we kind of like the same. She like tried to
Abby,
do it in
next time we're
Spanish
gonna do it
and
in Spanish,
mine in
okay?
English. Yes.
Yes.
We're gonna
We
do
can
them
try
in-
that.
in Spanish. Vamos a hacerlo en español, Abby, okay?
Okay.
Dr. Prada's gonna enjoy that too because
Yeah.
she speaks.
She's
that,
gonna
and
like it.
Yes. Yeah, we should do it.
Yeah, you do it in English and we'll do it in Spanish so she can
Okay.
learn.
un bilingual, un mezcladito
Yes.
ahí.
Okay.
Spanglish.
Spanglish. That's the right word. Spanglish. Yes.
Bueno,
I'm so sorry. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, it was
you did great.
a nice try, I think.
It was great. Well, we have less.
Well,
than-
this is our first one, girl. And I like, my son was here like, hey, do the Zoom. I don't know how to do it. Please.
We're learning.
Yes.
High concepts, we did it.
Technology.
Yes.
We're learning. Next time will be better.
Yes.
Thank you,
Oh, yes,
ladies.
for sure.
All right.
I'm
Thank
calling you all. Okay?
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, girls. Bye.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank
Bye,
you.
thank you.
Gracias. Mwah. Gracias. Bye.